At a certain point in life, many ambitious people experience something peculiar. They wake up at 5 in the morning, and before their feet touch the floor, their mind is already racing through the day's agenda. There's the presentation that needs to be perfect, the email that must be sent, the meeting where they need to prove themselves once again. They move through their morning routine with mechanical efficiency, coffee in hand, scrolling through notifications, comparing their progress to others who seem further ahead. Things that once filled them with excitement, a new project, a promotion, recognition, suddenly seem to lose their luster the moment they're achieved. The goalpost keeps moving, and naturally, they become exhausted in a way that sleep cannot fix. They think they just need to work harder, plan better, optimize more. They think the problem is that they haven't achieved enough yet. But what if I told you that this pain isn't about what you lack, but about what you're running from? You see, most of what we call ambition is actually a sophisticated form of escape. This might sound strange because we're taught to see ambition as virtuous, as the engine of progress and self-improvement. We admire ambitious people. We tell young people to be hungry, to reach for the stars, to never settle. And there's nothing inherently wrong with wanting to create, to build, to grow. But there's a particular flavor of ambition that doesn't taste like genuine desire. It tastes like desperation. This is what the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard was pointing out when he wrote about the sickness unto death. He wasn't talking about physical death, but about a kind of spiritual despair, where a person is constantly fleeing from themselves. The ambitious soul, in this sense, is running a race against their own shadow. They're trying to become someone other than who they are, to prove something, to finally arrive at a place where they can rest. But here's the cruel twist. The faster they run, the more the shadow keeps pace. It's like being desperately thirsty and drinking salt water. Each gulp creates more thirst, more urgency, more pain. Kierkegaard distinguished between different forms of despair, but the one most relevant here is what he called the despair of willing desperately to be oneself. It sounds contradictory. How can trying to be yourself be a form of despair? But he meant something specific. It's the despair of trying to construct a self through achievements, through external validation, through becoming someone impressive. You're not resting in what you are. You're frantically trying to build what you think you should be. This is the hidden pain of ambitious souls. They're not at peace with their existence, so they try to justify it, to earn it, to make it meaningful through constant striving. And it never works. Because the self you're trying to construct through ambition is always in the future. It's always just beyond reach. When I get the promotion, then I'll feel secure. When I build the company, then I'll have proved myself. When people recognize my work, then I'll know I matter. But these moments of arrival are always hollow, because the hunger isn't really about those external things. It's about an internal restlessness that can't be satisfied by anything external. Let me give you an analogy to make this clearer. Imagine a person who discovers that they cast a shadow. At first, it doesn't bother them, but then they start to notice it everywhere, following them, mimicking their movements, always there. They begin to find it unsettling, this dark double, so they decide to get away from it. They start walking faster. The shadow keeps up. They break into a run, still there. They run faster, pushing themselves to exhaustion, certain that if they just move quickly enough, they'll finally leave it behind. Of course, this is absurd. The shadow isn't pursuing them. It's being created by them, by the very light that makes them visible. The harder they run, the more exhausted they become, and the shadow never falls behind. Eventually, if they run long enough, they might collapse in exhaustion. And in that moment of stillness, something strange happens. The shadow is still there, but it's no longer threatening, it's just there. Neutral, part of the landscape. This is what's happening with the ambitious soul. The thing they're running from isn't something external they can escape through achievement. It's the uncomfortable awareness of their own existence, their own ordinariness, their own mortality and limitations. Kierkegaard would say it's the awareness that you are not your own foundation, that you are dependent, contingent, finite. For some people, this awareness creates a kind of existential panic. They cannot bear to simply be. They must become. They must do. They must prove. And so they construct an elaborate edifice of goals and achievements, telling themselves that these things will finally make them solid, real, justified. But achievements are like salt water, momentarily satisfying, but ultimately creating more thirst. You achieve one thing, feel a brief rush, and then the emptiness returns, often more acute than before. So you set the next goal, bigger this time, more impressive. And the pattern continues. This is the hidden pain, not the pain of failing to achieve, but the pain of achieving and discovering that it changes nothing fundamental about your inner state. Now, this period of recognition can be profoundly disorienting. Because if the thing you've organized your entire life around, ambition, becoming, achieving, is revealed to be a kind of flight from yourself, then who are you? What do you do with your days? What gives your life meaning? These questions can create tremendous anxiety, and I must warn you about something. The usual response is to try desperately to return to the old pattern. You might tell yourself you just need to find the right goal, the one that will finally satisfy you. Or you might swing to the opposite extreme and declare that all ambition is meaningless, falling into a kind of cynical passivity. Both of these are attempts to avoid the real work, which is something much more difficult and much simpler. Learning to be with yourself without the elaborate machinery of becoming. Think of it this way. You've been living in a house with a loud machine running in the basement. The machine has been running your entire life, so you don't even hear it anymore. It's just the background noise of existence. This machine is the constant churning of ambition, the endless planning and striving and comparing. One day the machine breaks down. Maybe it's burnout, or a failure, or simply exhaustion. And suddenly the house is silent. At first, the silence is terrifying. You don't know what to do with yourself. The absence of the machine's noise feels like something is horribly wrong. You rush to fix the machine, to get it running again, because at least that noise was familiar. But what if the machine breaking was not a disaster, but an opportunity? What if the silence, uncomfortable as it is actually showing you something you couldn't hear before? The sound of your own breath. The sensation of simply existing without the need to justify or prove that existence through constant achievement. Let me tell you about someone I once knew. He was the archetypal ambitious soul. Started his first company at 23, sold it at 29, immediately started another. He worked 16-hour days and wore his exhaustion like a badge of honor. His apartment was minimalist, not because he loved minimalism, but because he was never there. People admired him. He was living the dream, or so it seemed. Then, at 35, his body simply gave out. Not in a dramatic way, no heart attack or collapse, but in a way that was almost more disturbing. He woke up one morning and found that he couldn't make himself get out of bed. Not because he was physically paralyzed, but because the engine that had been driving him for 15 years had simply stopped. He lay there staring at the ceiling and felt absolutely nothing. No desire to check his email, no anxiety about the meetings he was missing, no fear of falling behind. Just a vast empty nothing. For weeks he stayed in this state. His friends and colleagues were worried, suggesting therapy, medication, a vacation. But he didn't do any of those things. He just stayed in that emptiness, because he was too exhausted to do anything else. And slowly something strange began to happen. At first it was just small things. He noticed the way light moved across his bedroom wall in the morning. He started hearing the sounds of his neighborhood. Children playing, birds, traffic, as if for the first time. These things had always been there, but he'd been too busy becoming to notice them. Then, one afternoon, he was sitting in his garden, a space he'd designed but never actually spent time in, and he realized he was crying. Not from sadness, but from something else. Relief, maybe. Or a kind of grief. He was grieving the years he'd spent running from this very moment, the simple fact of being alive, sitting in a garden, with nowhere to go and nothing to prove. What he discovered in that period wasn't anything mystical or transcendent. It was something almost disappointingly ordinary. He found that existence itself, stripped of all the achievements and goals and future projections, was not the void he'd feared. It was just here, present, complete in its incompleteness. Kierkegaard would call this resting transparently in the power that established it, which is a complicated way of saying, accepting that you don't have to construct your own foundation because you're already founded. You don't have to earn your existence through achievement, because existence isn't something you earn. It's something you're given, moment by moment. The ambitious soul's pain comes from refusing this gift, from trying to pay for something that's being offered freely. Now, if you're recognizing yourself in this description, you might be wondering, what do I actually do? How do I stop running? And this is where things get paradoxical, because the answer is both simple and impossible. You stop trying to stop. You see, the ambitious soul's first instinct, upon recognizing the pattern, is to turn stopping into a new project. I will learn to be present. I will practice mindfulness. I will achieve inner peace. But this is just the old machinery starting up again with a new coat of paint. The stopping I'm talking about isn't something you do. It's something you allow to happen by ceasing to do. So what does this look like in practical terms? It looks disappointingly ordinary. You continue your daily life, but you start paying attention to the quality of your engagement with it. When you're working on a project, you notice the moment when genuine engagement shifts into desperate proving. When you're scrolling through social media and feel that familiar pang of "I'm falling behind," you pause and feel where that sensation lives in your body. You don't try to fix it or think your way out of it. You just notice it. You have lunch, and instead of planning while you eat, you actually taste your food. You walk to your car, and instead of rehearsing the next conversation, you feel your feet on the ground. These sound trivial, but they're revolutionary acts for someone who's been running from themselves for years. And most importantly, and this is crucial, you stop comparing. You stop comparing where you are now to where you used to be. You stop comparing yourself to others who seem to have figured something out that you haven't. You stop comparing this moment to some imagined future moment when things will be better, because all of these comparisons are just new forms of the old pattern, refusing to be here now as this. Kierkegaard wrote, "The self is a relation that relates itself to itself." When you're constantly comparing, you're not relating to yourself. You're relating to an image, a projection, a should-be. The pain of the ambitious soul is the pain of this constant self-alienation. There's a particular kind of advice that ambitious people hate, and you're probably feeling resistance to it right now. Slow down, do less, rest. These suggestions feel like death, don't they? Because if you're not building, achieving, progressing, then what are you? This question itself reveals the problem. You've confused your being with your doing. You've made your existence conditional on your productivity. So when someone suggests doing less, it feels like they're suggesting you become less, exist less, matter less. But here's what you discover when you actually do slow down. When you actually do less, you don't disappear. You're still here. In fact, you might be more here than you've ever been because you're not constantly projected into some future version of yourself. You're just you. Not the successful you or the failed you, not the impressive you or the disappointing you, but the you that exists prior to all those judgments. Kierkegaard had a term for what I'm describing. He called it infinite resignation. It sounds bleak, but it's actually liberating. It's the resignation of the self that was trying to construct itself, to make itself into something impressive or significant through its own efforts. But resignation doesn't mean passivity or giving up. It means giving up on a particular project, the project of earning your existence. Once you've resigned from that project, you're free to engage with life not from desperation, but from something else. Curiosity, maybe. Creativity. Love. These things can coexist with ambition, but they have a completely different flavor. The ambition that comes after resignation isn't running from anything. It's just the natural overflow of engaging with life. Perhaps the reason ambitious souls experience this hidden pain is that they've outgrown the story they've been telling themselves. Not because they're better than that story, but because they've reached the limits of what that story can give them. You can only run from yourself for so long before your body and mind simply refuse to continue. And then you're thrown back on the very thing you've been avoiding, your own naked existence without the elaborate costume of achievements and goals. And it's not nothing. It's not a void. It's just you, here, breathing, alive, complete, exactly as you are. Not because you're perfect or enlightened, but because completeness isn't something you achieve, it's what you are when you stop adding and subtracting, stop comparing and improving, stop running from your own shadow. The pain eases not when you finally become someone impressive, but when you stop needing to be anyone other than what you already are. You just forgot for a while.